Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back everyone to lecture 2. Inshallah, in today's lecture, we will pick up where we left off. Actually, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit to talk about, we did the first section, which were the male inheritors, but as I had all these introductory remarks, I kind of sped through it by the time we got to it. So we'll back up just a little bit to cover what we talked about, and then we'll continue with the 7 types of female inheritors, commenting that if you expand them like an accordion, they're really 10, not 7, because of half siblings. We'll talk about that. And then the next section is people who always inherit. And people who always inherit doesn't mean that their inheritance share is not affected by different type of scenarios and circumstances. So that's a distinction I want you to learn, is that when we say they always inherit, it doesn't mean they always inherit the same amount. And there are different general scenarios to explain that. So they might not inherit full amounts if there's another type of universal inheritor, or if there's some kind of mitigating circumstance. So in the Hashia, there's a nice kind of outline of that we'll go through, inshallah. And then after that, we will talk about the people who never inherit. And the people who never inherit basically are slaves, even though he gives 3 kinds of slaves. In the Hashia, he comments, if he just said slavery, it would have been easier because it just kind of encompasses all of that. But to be dutiful to the book, we will read as it comes, but comment accordingly. And the murder, of course, al-qatilu la yarith, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the one who kills does not inherit. So we'll talk about that and explain it. An apostate, may Allah Ta'ala protect us. And then members of other religions. So in those last 2, the apostate and the members of other religion, there is some detail that we need to talk about, because non-Muslims can inherit from one another. What he means is that Muslims cannot inherit from non-Muslims, and non-Muslims can inherit from Muslims, but there's a difference of opinion from a Muslim inheriting from a non-Muslim. That's the key thing, especially if you live in a minority community, we want to highlight. Anyway, those are the main topics that we'll talk about, and we'll begin this discussion in the next clip, inshallah. All right, so we begin the way we always begin, which is to turn directly to the text of Qadi Abu Shuja' radiyallahu anhu in the original Arabic. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. والوارثات من النساء 7 البنت وبنت الابن وإن سفلت والأم والجدة وإن علت والأخت والزوجة والموالاة المعتقة. ومن لا يسقط بحال 5 الزوجان والأبوان وولد الصلب. ومن لا يرث بحال 7 العبد والمدبر وأم الولد والمكاتب والقاتل والمرتد وأهل الملتين. So our beloved Qadi Abi Shuja' radiyallahu anhu, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and the next. I just read starting with the female section, even though when I come to comment, we might just backtrack just for a moment. Not too long, just a minute or 2. So he says, rahimahullah, there are 7 females who inherit: a daughter, a son's daughter, the mother, a mother's grandmother, however high, a sister, a wife, and a female who freed the deceased. People who always inherit. 5 inheritors are never omitted: the husband and the wife, 1 and 2, the father and mother, 3 and 4, and an immediate descendant. You see an immediate descendant. So what I was saying in yesterday's lecture, in the opening lecture, the portions or the fractions of the inheritance shares are really based about proximity to the deceased. They're really not, and financial obligation. It's not really based on gender. Anyway, we'll get to that when we get to that. People who never inherit. 7 never inherit in any circumstances. Slaves, a slave who will be freed upon his master's death, and mudabbar. A female slave who has borne a child for her master, which is walad. So the slave owner has intercourse with the slave woman. She becomes pregnant. delivers, that delivery of that baby is the cause of her freedom. So it's called walad. A slave who is purchasing his freedom, al-mukatab, so he's kind of buying his freedom in installments. There's issue with that because each portion of freedom that he buys is a portion of freedom that he possesses. So he can inherit based on the portion of freedom. So there's some detail we need to talk about there. The murderer who killed the deceased, an apostate, may Allah Ta'ala protect us, and members of other religions, meaning Muslims and members of other religions. Adilla. I don't know how the adilla is going to work for this section. I don't know if there's a lot. Well, I already mentioned to you al-qatilu la yarith, the one who kills does not inherit. This is narrated in the Tirmidhi. We also have the hadith of Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu that's found in Muslim, also in Bukhari and Muslim. لا يرث المسلم الكافر ولا الكافر المسلم. So a Muslim does not inherit from a disbeliever, and a disbeliever does not inherit from a Muslim. That's a key hadith from the dalil point of view. Well, yeah, those are the ones for today's discussion. I'm not sure in the Hashia if there's more, but why don't we let me get my page opened here. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And then we can begin the discussion. Okay, so first let me backtrack for a little bit, which is to say, well, there's not really that much to say, but about the men who inherit. Remember how we said in the text, he says 10, but then like an accordion, you can expand them out to 15, because we add 5 based on half siblings. Okay, so that's just important. That's actually all I really wanted to say about that. I kind of felt the last clip I was rushing through it, so I just wanted to kind of go back a couple steps and then go forward at the same pace, hopefully. Also important from the last lecture that we talked about the wife, and when we talk about the wife, we also include in the wife a wife who has been divorced, but she is in a revocable divorce, al-raja'iyya. Al-ba'ina, the one who has been divorced a third time, there is no coming back, so therefore she's not going to inherit when the man dies. But the wife in the raja'iyya will inherit. Also, a wife who has just gotten married and the marriage has not been consummated. And that we say, the qaida, the rule is, al-mawtatu kad-dukhul, that the death in this case is the equivalent of a consummation, and she will also inherit. That's not in the Hashia, that's from my own studies and my own teachers. Al-mawtatu kad-dukhul, which is a qaida that's important, that's rarely talked about. So that would be another exception. So that's something I didn't mention in yesterday's class. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. All right, the women that inherit are 7, right? But he is going to expand them to 10. So let's do that together. So he says, rahimahullah, a daughter. Okay, that's pretty clear. Where's my commentary? A daughter. And a son's daughter, the mother and the grandmother, however high. Now here we can add one, either the mother as the mother's mother, or from the point of view of the father, your grandmother from the point of view of your father. So the grandmother is your maternal or paternal grandmother. So here we add one, so we go from 7 to 8. And then a sister, here we're going to add 2, either a full sister, which is what the assumption here, or a sister from the father or a sister from the mother. Okay, so that's how we go from 7 to 10. So the grandmother we add 1, because it could be paternal or maternal, and then the sister, it can be full, which is what is mentioned here, or a half sister from the mother, half sister from the father, half sister from the mother, so that's 2 more. So in total we've added 3 to the 7 to make them 10. And then a wife, um, as we said, including the things that I just said a couple minutes ago about a revocable marriage or a wife who's been married and that has not the marriage has not been consummated. Um, Now, there's an interesting kind of linguistic note here, as just because we have the space to kind of get into some of these things because the chapter is not that long. When we say a spouse in the Arabic language or in the language of the Sharia, we use a zawj, and a zawj is both male and female in the Arabic language. However, Imam al-Nawawi says, using the ta marbuta as zawja in the chapter of inheritance is on purpose, and by extension, this is for me kind of recommended, so that we can make the differentiation between a husband and a wife. Because in this case, it is very important that we understand who we're talking about exactly, because inheritance will be based on that. And then a female who freed the deceased, al-mu'ala, al-mu'tiqa. Now, like in the male section, if all of these women exist, who will inherit? 5 will inherit. The daughter, the son's daughter, the mother, the wife, and the full sibling sister. And this is only in the scenario if a man dies who's married. So that's just also from the commentary point of view. Okay, so this section, what we just read, is a mirror of the first section that we did in the last clip. Who are the men that will inherit? Who are the women that will inherit? Kind of to give you a mental map of who are the people that will inherit. There's 10 from the men. We know that we can expand it to 15. There's 7 from the women. We know that we can expand it to 10. And basically, the expansion is from half siblings. So it's kind of easy to think about. And usually when we discuss inheritance law, usually this is the kind of order that we follow, so we can first establish who it is that we're talking about, and therefore those that we're talking about means that we're not talking about some other people, and that's going to come very soon. So we'll pick this up in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, next section, people who always inherit. 5 inheritors are never omitted, and we'll go through them shortly. What does that mean that they're never omitted? So in this, we have a term called al-hijab, or al-hujub, which is a veil, that somebody veils somebody else from inheriting. So there are 2 types of hijab in inheritance. The first type is called hujub al-hirman, which is the veiling of prevention. So there are certain circumstances, I will describe them now, when they exist, it blocks somebody from inheriting. Like killing the person you're supposed to inherit from, servitude, becoming enslaved, and that will come. And you are blocked. So that's the first type. Another type is hujub al-niqsan. Hujub niqsan means that you have been blocked in a reduction of the share. The first kind means that you're blocked completely. So if a son, may Allah Ta'ala protect us all, if a son kills their father, then that act blocks them completely from inheriting. There's no reduction. It goes down to 0, no matter what. Even if that person, as we will come to see, even if that son was coerced, somebody put a gun to their head and said, if you don't kill your father, I'm going to kill you, even if it was by accident, even if it was involuntary, any type of killing, because the hadith is very, prima facie, it's very clear, al-qatilu la yarith, that the one who kills is not does not inherit, and the al-ta'rif, the definite article there, would include, therefore, from a linguistic point of view, all of the scenarios. I mean, we'll get to that momentarily. That's a blocking of a prevention, of complete prevention. But then in this case, the universal inheritors that we're going to talk about, they can be blocked in reduction. So let me go through, he has a few of them, and I think it's kind of a neat thing for us to talk about, especially since we have the time. So one type of blocking in reduction is that you can go from one fraction to another fraction. Like a woman can inherit from her husband if he has kids, one per fraction, the fourth, or if he has kids, she gets an eighth. So it's like a reduction of the inheritance share. Another type of reduction, if there's a universal male inheritor present. So a daughter will inherit no matter what, but if she has a brother, then the brother will cause her share to be reduced. Another type of reduction is that your share can be reduced based on the presence of a universal inheritor. I think I just did that one, sorry. That you can have one universal inheritor and then another universal inheritor present, and that combination reduces the fraction of the share. That's another scenario. You can go from a universal inheriting share to a reduced fraction share, like if there's a grandfather all by himself, he will inherit as a universal inheritor, or if he is present with brothers, then there's a reduction of the fractions. You can have more of one type of inheritor, so then the fraction has to be split over those type, if like there are many siblings. And likewise, if there are many universal inheritors. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He gives 6 different types or scenarios of reduction. The first one, let me just go over them again, is you can have one fraction to another fraction. Number 2 is you can go from one universal inheritor and then the presence of another universal inheritor will cause a differentiation in the inheritance share. Number 3, you can go from a fraction to a universal inheritor. Number 4 is you can have a universal inheritor going to a fraction. Number 5 is that there are many of the fraction types, there are many of them. And number 6, if there are universal inheritors of the same kind and there are many of them. So anyway, this will be clear. You can just kind of watch it again once you finish this section and go back because it will be clear, inshallah. But basically what he's saying is that when we talk about people who always inherit, that does not mean that their fraction of inheritance won't be affected. It can be affected if they fall in one of those 6 scenarios, and in fact they do, and that's why the laws of inheritance can be difficult, because you got to know the different combinations. What he is saying is that the absolute prevention of inheritance, like the one who kills the person they're supposed to inherit from, that will not take place because these people always inherit. Okay, that's what he's talking about. Now, let's go. People who are never omitted the first one. Az-zawjan, the husband and wife, okay, the father, the mother, al-abawan, and an immediate male descendant. An immediate descendant, male or female. Al-waladan. So al-walad, like az-zawj, is going to be one of those words in the Arabic language that can apply for both male and female. Like az-zawj, or zawjan, husband and wife. Al-walad, al-walidan, boy and girl. And this has come up in previous sections like in zakat and whatnot. Wal-abawan, the same thing, is a word that means both the father and the mother. Now, why do these people always inherit? Because there's a relationship, a blood relationship, or the word that we kind of coined yesterday, a womb relationship. They don't have a type of relationship based on, like, for example, the manumission situation. When a man frees a slave or a woman frees a slave, there's a wala, there's a type of loyalty that's involved in that. That is secondary. So again, just to underscore the philosophy behind our inheritance system is that we are looking always at the womb relationship. The closer the womb relationship, now whether it's a womb relationship that's based on marriage, like a husband and wife, obviously they're not related to each other from the womb, but they're going to create life, inshallah, together, if Allah so bestows. Whether it's by marriage or by actual birth, and then therefore a descending order of birth. And again, I know you're probably sick of me already saying this, even though it's like lecture 2, but you got to remember this stuff because this will explain to you the philosophy, the rhyme and the reason, as we say in English, behind the fractions. This has nothing to do with gender. I mean, it does have to do with gender in the sense that there are categories of men and women, but that's not what the shares are determined. The shares, or the ultimate determination is this, the womb relationship, and then relationship through marriage, and then al-wala, or a type of loyalty based on manumission. That's kind of the order. And then underscoring all of that is the financial responsibility. So if there is a discrepancy in the share between people, a wife taking less when her husband has children, etc., because the children therefore are supposed to take care of the mother. So the extra share usually is an indication that that person has extra financial responsibilities. And that's the easiest way to think about the sister taking half of the brother, because either the sister is going to be single, in which case her brothers have to support her, that's why they have extra share, even if they have their own families, or the sister is married, in which case her husband has to support her, so she doesn't need as much of a share, etc., etc. And then when the sister who's married, by the way, when she takes a share, even though it's half those of her brothers, that share is completely hers. It's not her husband's or her children. She can do with it what she wants. Whereas the brothers that take double the share, they have to spend it on their families and things like that, or support their mother, and. Okay, I'll keep repeating it because it bears repeating, and we'll pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. All right, moving right along. We just did the inheritors who are never omitted. Sorry, caught my tongue. Now, the final section, we want to look at the people who never inherit. Okay? So, the first one is, or the first three, are slaves. Al-Bayjuri, rahimahullah, and others will say in the Hashiyah that it would have been better if the author, in this case Abu Shuja' radiallahu anhu, just simply said ar-riq, or servitude, because it kind of encompasses everything, and it's very common. One of the things that commentators and people that write glosses often do is that they will comment on the phraseology of the original text. Now, I also want to highlight something here, which it's a little off topic, but I mean, again, we have time. I have like 9 more minutes, so I have time. We do not edit the original text. We take it as it is. That's why we are a community, a tradition of transmission. So we transmit what we have. Whether it's sound or weak or whether there are errors, we transmit it, but then we add layers of commentary. So we're not here to edit. I'm not going to change what Abu Shuja said because I think I have a better way of saying it. I will say what he said, and then I can say, I think, therefore, so on and so forth. So that's also important. Okay, the first type of just straight out slavery. Also, I want to point out a language point that Ibn Hazm rahimahullah has, that the word al-abd, which is a male slave, but the word abd also encompasses al-ama, the female slave. So a lot of these dualities here in this section of inheritance, that when we say al-abd or al-abid, we are assuming linguistically men and women. But because of the popular usage of the term, especially when you come to a section like a section like inheritance, you have to use al-abd and al-ama, just like we're going to use az-zawja and az-zawj and az-zawja, al-ibn wal-bint, etc. A son or a daughter, a husband or a wife, al-ab or al-um, the father and the mother, so on and so forth. Okay. But linguistically, the word abd encompasses male and female slaves. Okay, so the first type is a slave that's kind of under the ownership. I mean, we don't have any slavery anymore. I understand that, and I've commented on that multiple times. But we take the fiqh from it because we learn the fiqh the way it's come to us, and maybe we'll benefit from some kind of philosophical legal argument. The second type is a slave who will be freed upon his master's death, al-mudabbar. So the slave owner says to the slave, when I die, you are free. So the reason al-Bayjuri, Ibn Qasim and others will say, well, Abu Shujaf, he just said al-riq would have been easier, because from this point of view, there's no difference. There's no difference between a full-out slave or a slave who will become free when the master dies, because both of them are not going to inherit from the master or from the owner. He says, لو عبر بالرقيق لكان أولى. If he said الرقيق, a slave would have been better. مدبر. Okay. Walad, the mother of a child, literally, which is like a term, a very famous term. And when you read medieval Islamic sources, histories, I mean, Walad, it's just like all over the place. So that's, now you know what it is that when a man owns a slave woman, and she's not married or anything like that, and he has sexual intercourse with her and she becomes pregnant, the birth of that child becomes the source of her freedom when the owner dies. So it's called Walad. And there are a lot of people received manumission, a lot of slaves received manumission through this. So when people attack Islam and they say, ma malakat aymanukum, and sexual slaves and all that kind of stuff, I mean, that's really only 30% of the story, because there's much more that's going on. Because not only is there that the cause of freedom, but then that's also the cause of other type of relations that will happen. Okay, anyway, so the Walad will not inherit. Al-Mukatab is it's kind of like an indentured type of situation where the slave is purchasing their freedom. I mean, all of this will be discussed in the last section or the last unit of this fiqh course when we get to the end of the book, because it's the last section, Kitab al-Itq, the book of manumission. One second. Okay, and then the last sort of bit, so those first three are kind of slavery. The last bit is al-qatil, okay, the one who kills. With the exception of the mufti and the person who narrates the story of what happened, like a witness or something like that. So if there's a mufti involved and he affirms that the death took place or something like that, he is not considered al-qatil. And the reason that exception is there is that anybody who participated in the death or in the killing is considered al-qatil, whether directly or indirectly. And because there's indirect involvement, also can block the inheritance, we have the exception of the mufti or like the qadi or something like that, because they're involved in the situation, but for obvious reasons, to certify that what happened. So I said that the person who kills does not inherit, even if they were coerced to inherit, even if it was voluntary or involuntary manslaughter, amdan aw khata'an, aw shibha amd, or there's that confusion in whether it's partly this, partly that. whether the person meant to hurt and the person died, which is like a form of involuntary, all the stuff that we talked about in the had punishment section, all of those things, if somebody is involved in that and they have killed somebody, whether all of these scenarios, somebody that they would normally inherit from, then they are not, that will block them forever from inheriting. The Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ لِلْقَاتِلِ شَيْءٍ. This is from Abi Dawood, narrated by Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhu. So another dalil, this wasn't the dalil book. Okay, and then the murtad, an apostate, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. An apostate or a zindiq. A zindiq is the technical term for the munafiq, which is somebody who publicly claims their Islam and might even hang out with the Muslims and do what the Muslims do, but privately, they're not, they're disbelievers, and it's shown later that they're in a state of disbelief. So basically, somebody who was a Muslim and then left, they can't inherit from their families that are Muslim, and neither will we inherit from them. So it goes both ways. And then the members of other religions, again, let me just put this down because it's bothering me, but this is also something that the commentators will comment on. It's not the most accurate phraseology, because what the fiqh is telling us is that a Muslim can't inherit from a non-Muslim, nor can a non-Muslim inherit from the Muslims. But non-Muslims can inherit between one another, because from the point of view of inheritance law, non-Islam is all one millah, it's all one religion. It's just the religion of non-Islam. So we do not differentiate between a Jew and a Christian, a Zoroastrian, a Hindu, a Buddhist, etc., from the point of view of this inheritance stuff. But from the point of view of, in other cases of like Ahlul Kitab, there are differentiations. But in this section of law, there is no differentiation. So the phraseology, wa Ahlul Millatain, people of two religions, is a little bit ambiguous. Anyway, there is a difference of opinion. He says, when عقد الإجماع على أن الكافر لا يرث المسلم. There is a consensus that a non-believer does not inherit from a Muslim. واختلفوا في توريث المسلم من الكافر. But there is a difference of opinion of a Muslim inheriting from a non-Muslim. والجمهور على المنع, and the majority position is that it is not permissible. And he kind of just leaves it there. But there, in other books like Ar-Razi, I said in his tafsir and other places, there is a difference of opinion. So for Muslims living in minority communities where this type of sensitivity of cross inheritance is not an issue, if somebody converted to Islam and their family is okay with their conversion and they want them to inherit from them, you could take that weaker opinion and say it's permissible. But what we can't do as Muslims is we can't inherit out of the religion, just like most religions won't want to inherit out of their religions anyway. And we'll kind of pick up a little bit on that next class as we continue. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's class, we began by backing up just a little bit to the first section, which was the male inheritors. Just wanted to comment a little bit about that. And then we picked up really with the female inheritors. We went through the list of 7, commenting that we can expand it out like an accordion to 10 because of half siblings and paternal and maternal grandmothers. And then we talked about the people who always inherit. And when we said that the people always inherit, it doesn't mean they always inherit the same amount. They might inherit different shares. And we went through the 6 scenarios, general scenarios, in which an inheritance share can be affected by the existence of other people or other classes or more than one of the same class, etc. The kind of things that we talked about. In this discussion, we also learned a little bit about language, that the word zawj in the Arabic language means both husband and wife, but in the section or the part of Islamic law that deals with inheritance where we are, it's better to spell it out, husband or wife, zawj and zawja, using the ta marbuta, because there's, we don't want any ambiguity when we're talking about who's inheriting who. The same thing goes for al-abawain, mother and father. We said the same thing when we say the word abd. Linguistically, it can mean a male slave or a female slave, but in this section of law, we will spell them out for the reasons just mentioned. And then we talked about the people who never inherit. The first three types are just slaves, and from the point of view of not inheriting, it doesn't matter what kind of slave they are. So it would have been easier if the text just simply said slavery, but we read it the way it comes. And then, sorry, the first four are slaves. My bad, not first four. And then we talked about the murderer who killed the deceased. Any type of involvement, whether it's premeditated, voluntary, involuntary, by accident, somebody who aided secondarily, and anybody who aided in the death of the deceased will not inherit from the deceased. And then we talk about the apostates, people who left Islam, or hypocrites, people that practice Islam but secretly don't have Islam, they will not inherit. And then people of different religions, i.e. people, non-Muslims inheriting from Muslims and Muslims inheriting from non-Muslims. Commenting in that last kind, there is a difference of opinion. And in Muslim minority scenarios, that might be more, it might make more sense to follow that difference of opinion. Anyway, those are the main topics we talked about. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.